Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share an update on my experience with the Microsoft Surface Pro 7. For those of you that missed my unboxing, I will catch you up right now. This is the Core i5 version with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. We also finally have a Type-C port, a big deal in my opinion, even though there's no Thunderbolt connectivity. We also have quick charging with the included Surface Pro charging brick. This is the matte black color. For those of you wondering whether or not it is a fingerprint magnet, it is. Would I recommend or advise not selecting the color as a result? Absolutely not. Moving away from the color and the build here, I want to talk specifically about Intel's 10th generation low voltage processors that the Surface Pro lineup, as well as the Surface Laptop 3, are sporting. And that's because they are very good. They are power efficient. Yes, we did lose a little bit of runtime on this model, but battery life is still very good. And then the fact that we have quick charging now, not only through the Surface Pro power brick, but also through Type-C, really does, in my opinion, offset any literal loss in the physical size of the battery from the Surface Pro 6. Now, this doesn't render the Surface Pro 6 obsolete. It makes the Surface Pro 6 a great value at a very affordable price point, still for one of the best tablets on the market that can replace your laptop as long as your laptop hasn't replaced your desktop. Bearing that in mind, the Surface Pro 7 is the best Surface Pro ever made, and it should be. Now, when it comes to gaming and content creation, you're going to want to step up to the i7 with 16 gigs of RAM. There's just no way around that. In fact, this is the first time that the i7 with 16 gigs of RAM is by far and away a clean winner in every attribute when it comes to content creation and gaming. But that doesn't mean that the Core i5 does not have its place. After all, the i5 I have here is a fanless machine, so if silence is what you're after, you'll get it here. And 8 gigs of RAM still allows you to do just about everything. It's just what I mentioned beforehand, gaming and content creation, that is where you will see a real difference. And you can see the 3D Mark score here. It's nothing that's going to blow you away, but if what you're after is great performance when it comes to integrated graphics gaming, then the i7 is really what you should get. This can still game. You'll get more out of the i7 though. And even though you can still create content here, I still would not recommend an i5 for anything 4K or raw tremendous files from a full frame camera. It's just not going to be an ideal experience. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just not a preferred way in my experience. So I'm going to show you a little bit. I'll bump this up to 4K. This is actually my unboxing. And yes, the resolution of the screen hasn't been improved. We still don't have a 4K display. Hopefully we will eventually get that. But let's take a look and a listen. A really big deal because, whoops, going the wrong way there. I think many of you will agree, it finally takes the Surface Pro to the present. For many years, the Surface Pro has always been the tablet that could replace your laptop. But since Type-C became a standard that most of us rely on, the Surface Pro kind of got lost in the mix. It no longer had a connectivity option. And that still stands.
I'm Cortana, and I'm here to help.
The microphone. So you're seeing there's really no buffering jumping around in 4K video on YouTube, and there shouldn't be, right? I mean, this is Microsoft and Intel's latest and greatest attempt at giving us a mobile computing solution.
Again, I can't reiterate enough.
And it does a really good job. I'm going to show you another piece of content. Let's just look at some 4K video. I'll even throw in HDR, even though we're not going to get HDR. The Costa Rica standard.
You don't have to be a tech YouTuber to get sweet deals on
we
the
get
stuff
Linus
you find
in the mix there,
you
of course.
Just need to install
And I have simultaneously been reviewing the HP Spectre X360 2-in-1 with the Intel 10th Gen CPU, as well as the Lenovo C940 and the Surface Laptop 3. So I'm going to be able to give you perspectives on all of those machines, but again, this update is all about the Surface Pro 7. So, is the Surface Pro 7 right for you? Well, I've already mentioned that if content creation or gaming in this form factor is your priority, the i5 isn't necessarily right for you. But if you are the other customer that does not need those other attributes, this is nearly a perfect machine. Battery life, very close to last year. I mentioned that already. The Pro 6 does have a little more battery life, but that's, the Type-C as well as quick charging from the Surface Pro 7 brick, I've already stated, those compensate for that. In terms of regular computing power and gaming, this can do things, no question about it. And when it comes to browsing the web, those type of things, you're not going to have any sort of disappointment. The type cover has stayed the same, but that's for good reason. I mean, there's no reason for a new type cover when the whole design has not been rethought out, which it hasn't. Touchscreen input, very good. We're getting more ads, of course. Take you over to some state news. And it just works as it should. Pen input, also very good. Pinch to zoom, even on something like that, still very good. Not what we're looking at, but the actual performance. And these are things we expect, right? I mean, you can put this under load even with 8 gigs of RAM. It's not going to get too ugly. It's just not. And I like what I see here. It's something where, the Surface Pro 7 is, as I've said, the best Surface Pro we've ever had. And of course, we still have nothing like this from Apple. We do have other competitors in the marketplace, but nothing that really goes after the fit, finish, build quality, and of course, the company that backs it up, Microsoft. There just really isn't a primary competitor. So while there are many alternatives, there is not one product I could pinpoint that is better at being what the Surface Pro represents, which is the best of both worlds. But if you need, as I mentioned at the top of the video, a true desktop replacement, this is not where you should be looking. You should be looking at a completely different class of laptops that actually has a processor with true chops that can actually deal with 4K video, that can deal with raw image editing in not just Lightroom, but in true Photoshop. So those are things you have to be aware of. I mentioned battery life, and that's because I heard so many negative things about it. And the truth of the matter is that the Core i5 does well. In my experience, you're looking at, with brightness cranked all the way up, which by the way it is in the course of this video, and performance, all the way to the right, you're looking at somewhere around 7 hours. And that's pretty good. Might be a little less than 7, but that's still very, very good. If I lower the brightness, if I take things down, lower performance, the overall usage of the juice, so to speak, then we start to get closer to the territory that I think a lot of users look for, which is that, 9 to 10 hours, which, considering this is a tablet that will replace a laptop, is very impressive. This is not a laptop. Remember, everything is inside the Surface Pro 7. This is just a magnetic keyboard that I can pull off. And this still has best-in-class performance. And I'm just really excited to see what next year holds in the form of Surface Pro 7, aka 8, other than what I expect will garner a Thunderbolt port that we don't have here. Again, the Type-C is great, but giving us Thunderbolt will be even better. But I'm hoping we're going to see a redesign. I hope they didn't decide to scrap the redesign in favor of the Neo, which is possible. And of course, we'll get a second generation Surface Pro X. I will be covering the Pro X and comparing it to this later on. But that pretty much rounds things out for this update. Battery life is good. Quick charging is very good. I'm not getting the 80% in an hour that Microsoft claims. It's a little bit less than that. About an hour and a half for a full charge, whether you're on Type-C or the proprietary Surface Pro port, the Microsoft charging brick, which I still like as an option because, as you know, if you pull it away, it's not going to get damaged. If someone trips over it, you only have to worry that the person who trips doesn't get hurt. The machine isn't going to. Of course, if you charge using Type-C, you run into a whole nother world, because if that gets yanked or ripped out, it will damage that Type-C port. I'm glad they retained the SD card slot. That really would have been a terrible thing to give up. And I don't think that day is necessarily so far away, because if you look at the rest of the products they launched, the Surface Laptop, still no storage expansion. We don't have a refresh of the Surface Book. I'm hoping we're going to see that. Really my favorite of the Surface lineup of products. The Pro X, no micro SD card slot, which just smells like Apple. So this is the only product that I see right now where Microsoft still has a true version of their own identity. The Pro X, it's a nice implementation of the Surface Pro line, but until I get it in my hands and actually use it, it looks like it's only going to be good for content consumption. I mean, you're limited by that processor. Here, that limitation doesn't exist. So it's a big plus for the Surface Pro 7. And again, when it comes to fit and finish, there's just nothing else like this still. And that's with me, as I mentioned at the top of the video, including everything that I'm reviewing right now, which are a lot of the Surface Pro 7's competition, especially the 2-in-1s like the Lenovo and the HP Spectre. I mean, those go toe-to-toe with this. This has a 12.3-inch display. Those have 13.3 and a 14-inch or 13.9, respectively, with the Lenovo. And in terms of weight, they are a little bit heavier, but they sport all of the same internals. It's the same 10th gen chipset lineup, same very similar configurations. The difference is they're a little bit heavier and they aren't a Microsoft product. And trust me, it makes a difference out of the box. No question about that. Microsoft was smart when they entered the business, and they continue to be smart in their approach to navigating the entire hardware scene. So I can definitely recommend this, even though this is only an update. I mean, I've reviewed almost every single Surface Pro that Microsoft has ever made. I think I only skipped out on like the 5, which they didn't even call the 5. They were getting a little lost and confused. But the 7 is absolutely worth the investment. Again, it really just becomes a matter of, do you need the i7 or do you need the i5 that is fanless? And you should know that. If you have no plans of doing anything you would with a full-blown desktop, the i5 is fine. If you do, consider the i7 and still understand the limitations. But that's pretty much it for this update. Hope everyone enjoyed. Any other questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.